Nepal has seen some fascinating, confusing, and deadly demonstrations, 74 dead, thousands injured, and a government changed, if not overthrown. There is a new prime minister thanks to the Gen Z protest, which on the one hand followed the classic pattern of a government trying to suppress information and the people rising up. On the other hand, the information was things like social media and TikTok and hashtags and AI and disinformation played a huge role in this overthrow. No one I'd rather talk to about all of this than our old Asia expert, our Asia hand. You know, Asia's old. Jonah's not. Jonah Blank, he is the author of Mullahs on the Mainframe and Arrow of the Blue-Skinned God. Welcome back to The Gist.
Thank you for having me, Mike. And I'm old too, but not as old as Asia.
So this was my first question as I was watching the protests and hearing their complaints. Was the complaint a righteous one in that the government was, in fact, using the classic means of suppression of withholding the free flow of information? Or was it more of entertainment, or based on something other than we need our accurate information so that we as the people can react in a civically responsible way? In other words, was this about newspapers printing accurate information, or was this about social media and hashtags?
It was about social media, but that's a bigger thing than just watching the latest trends on TikTok. In Nepal, as in many countries, most countries probably, social media is where people get their news, where people get their information. So the newspapers, even to some extent the radio stations, the TV stations in Nepal, are not really all that important. They matter, but Nepal is a very social media focused place, as are basically every country in the world nowadays.
Yes.
And in Nepal in particular, for reasons we can discuss, largely due to the incredible number of people working overseas and sending home remittances, social media plays an even bigger role there.
Yeah. And the reason they have to work overseas is the other major factor. And this is a constant. It's the economy. But is it the case that the government, the elected government, was trying to repress information? Do newspapers and newspapers with websites, are they able to report on corruption within the ranks of the leadership? Are they able to freely report on dissidents, or are they suppressed and oppressed?
They're not so much suppressed as just irrelevant. They exist. They do their job. It's good that they're doing their job. You have to have journalists in every country doing their job. But if it were just old school journalists, the government wouldn't have cared. What they really cared about were things like TikTok, where the incredible new wealth is just being put out there in people's faces. Nepal has done better in the past couple decades under democracy than it had done before economically. There's a lot more money coming in, but as is the case often, it's not very evenly distributed. So you get a lot of the wealthy showing off their new wealth on TikTok, on Instagram, on every platform, and then the people who don't have all these goodies don't like it.
Right. So the prime minister's son and daughter-in-law, they're something of the Kardashian types.
Yes.
They flaunt their wealth. This angers people. And that was why the government wanted to take away. Well, it's interesting. You said TikTok a few times, but from what I understand, there was a law that all social media companies had to comply with. And TikTok did agree to comply with the law, but some of the others didn't.
Right. And just as everything else in Nepal, nothing really operates the way it's supposed to, and nothing really operates very efficiently. So, for example, when you say, is the media oppressed? Well, I mean, to some extent, but not very effectively. Nepal didn't do democracy very effectively. It doesn't do oppression very effectively. Even the social media crackdown, it wasn't all that universal. I had WhatsApp communications with extended family members there, and part of the reason it wasn't so effective is that everybody's got a VPN, or at least everybody in the middle classes who can afford it. Everybody who wants a VPN has got a VPN. But it's who wants to have to jump through all these hoops and have the government telling you, don't worry, there's nothing to see here, when you're seeing right in your Instagram feed a politician's daughter showing off her Gucci bag.
Right. So it was a populist uprising. We want our social media back, not just to send around stupid memes, though that too.
Yeah, yes,
but
very much that.
Yes, but because it's reflecting poorly on you, the elite. So
yeah,
that's basically the story of the uprising.
And this underlying anger of, wait a second, we're not really getting much benefit from all this money flowing in. We're not getting much benefit from this democracy everybody's talking about. In the meantime, we're feeling some of the negative sides. For example, back the first time I went to Nepal was, I'm showing how old I am now, 1994. And Kathmandu was a totally different place than it is now. It had the feel almost of a quaint village compared with how it is right now. Now Kathmandu has terrible, unbreathable air, traffic jams that take you an hour to get across town. So everybody has to deal with the downside of being brought into the world trade and the world economic system. But they're not getting the Gucci bags, and they're not getting really much of the jobs outside of kind of some low-level service economy jobs. People still have to go to to the Gulf and work in practically indentured servitude just to pay the bills.
When did Nepal throw off the shackles of the monarchy?
Well, Nepal became a constitutional monarchy in 1990, and the monarchy itself was abolished in 2008. Whether it was the shackles or not kind of depends on who who you're asking and when, because it was never really a particularly brutal monarchy. The monarchy had a lot of popular support, in some ways similar to the monarchy in Thailand, which under the previous king had tremendous popular support and still sort of does. Even now, there are monarchists in Nepal, quite a few of them. The thing is, the entire royal family was virtually killed off in 2001 by Crown Prince Dipendra. There was nothing political about it. He had some real serious mental problems, and for a whole interesting story of reasons, he basically slaughtered most of his family. His father, Gyanendra, happened to be out of the palace at the time, and he then inherited the monarchy, but he was never a popular figure. He still isn't. He's still in Kathmandu right now, thinking he's going to come back into power, and maybe he will, but he never had the popular support and the love that his brother and his predecessors had had.
But this slaughter essentially wipes away the most unifying force in a country that we're soon to see has disunity and factionalism in its future.
Yes. I wouldn't oversell the degree to which the monarchy was binding Nepal together. I would say Nepal was and still is bound together by inertia. Remember, this is a very mountainous, craggy, essentially very localized country. On a map, it looks like one country, but it can take you weeks to get from Kathmandu to the other side of the country if you're going by bus, which is how most people would go. So it wasn't really in anyone's interest to break away and have these different little, tiny little statelets. But a lot of the factionalism that we see looks very ideological. The factions are the Congress Party, sort of a traditional centrist liberal party, and two different communist parties: the UML, the Communist Party, United Maoist, Marxist-Leninist, and the Maoists. However, the Maoists and the Marxist-Leninists, they're only communist in a very, very light sense of the term. There's very little ideology behind it.
So the current, or the up until a couple of weeks ago, the prime minister, who is Sharma Oli, he was a communist. He was a revolutionary. He promised freedom, and then he just failed to deliver based on difficulty or corruption or intention meeting reality. What's your assessment?
Well, he was a communist, but I wouldn't say he was ever a revolutionary. He
Hmm.
had never been out in the jungle. He had never been outside of the political mainstream. The Maoists, on the other hand, had fought a very bloody revolutionary struggle for over a decade, from about 1996 until about 2006. And they then won the first free and fair post-monarchy election in 2008. However, when they came into power, these three parties had basically been trading places, playing a little game of musical chairs
Yeah.
for, let's see, that's 2008 to 2025, whatever the math is on that, 13
17,
years?
18 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the terms only last a couple years. So
Well, it's
not much
parliament.
changes,
Yeah,
right,
it's a
between the
parliamentary
parties. Yeah.
structure. They just keep on sort of failing to deliver anything and then getting voted out of office in the next election. And whenever you look at Nepali politics in this time and you talk to Nepalis and you sort of ask what's going on, people's attitude is always, yeah, well, whatever, it's just nothing really changes. Nothing really happens. Oli was prime minister. I think it was 5 times. Deoba was definitely prime minister 5 times. That is Shashilla Deoba, the Congress Party politician leader. And Prachanda, the Maoist leader, was prime minister a few times. None of them really did anything. They all were corrupt. They all basically just were perceived to be in it for themselves and not really delivering very much to their constituents.
Given the geography, the history, let's not take where they are now. I want to talk about the potential. Has the potential of Nepal been squandered, or is it more the case that it is, though filled with 30 million people, fairly isolated, fairly mountainous, country that isn't at the crossroads of the world, maybe doesn't have the infrastructure? I know there's a water crisis in Kathmandu. It has a lot of problems, and we really couldn't have expected it to be the next Asian tiger.
I think there's a lot of potential, and also its output, or at least what it has delivered for its people, is far, far below whatever potential it might have. The potential of the Nepali people, you can see just by the fact that they go all around the world and do incredibly difficult things that other people are not as able to do. For example, I've spent a lot of time in Afghanistan during the war years over there, and Nepalis were everywhere. They were running the food services for the Americans. They were running protection. That is the legitimate paid mercenary protection for the Americans, the Brits, for everyone. I'm sure you've heard, I'm sure most of your audience has heard of the Gurkhas. The Gurkhas are a particular a particular military formation of Nepalis, almost all of them Gurungs, a particularly subset, a community near Pokhara, which in the 19th century kind of got into the business of being mercenaries, in part because of British colonialism, and found that that they're very, very good at it. So you can go to Hong Kong, you can go to Singapore, you can go to the Gulf, and you'll find Nepalis undertaking some of the most important security missions that the wealthiest people in the world do not entrust to anyone else.
Tell me about the possibilities of the new Prime Minister, Shashilla Karki, who is a anti-corruption Supreme Court justice. What hope is there for her to break through, given the situation that you've laid out?
I have to be a little pessimistic, just because it's so hard to grasp for reasons to look at Nepal and say things are going to be radically different tomorrow than they were yesterday. She doesn't really have any kind of power base. She's only put in so that it wasn't one of the other three parties, all three of which are utterly discredited. Mm-hmm. The military is the only group that has any real power, and it doesn't have any real love. They're not a beloved military. So she can stay in as long as the military keeps her in, but that's very different from actually delivering something or creating a movement. So if you were to ask me how I would bet things play out, I would bet that there is another election within a certain number of months, and one of the three parties goes in this cycle again.
Yeah.
Whichever one of them is smart about it may jettison its old leadership and try to rebrand itself to get ahead of this anger. So,
right. The idea of the beloved military, or at least the repository of public trust. This is true in places like Turkey and true in Pakistan. And it's not always a good thing, but at least it reflects that there is an institution that has credibility. And to me, from all your description and everything that I've been reading, it seems like Nepal is a place without any credible institutions. And into that maw comes social media, which is has a lot of dislocations associated with it. Everything that you're saying makes me worried for this place that I've always had a lot of affection for. Also, I like the hats, I like their flag, I like the name Kathmandu, all these reasons, and the Gurkhas.
All very good reasons.
Do you? I don't know if you've done a study of this or have any inclination, but this is a mutiny. This is an uprising that was very quick, and they got what they wanted very quickly. And I don't know that it had real leaders per se. It certainly didn't have a bunch of people who are shaping the ideology and crafting some sort of shadow government and really thinking in a rigorous way about replacing the government or ideology. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for the possibility of a future when there is an uprising that stems from that sort of hard work that was put in. But man, in Nepal, it just happened in an instant. It was the first flash mob that overthrew a country. And I would have to guess that does not augur well for the possibility of real, lasting, effective change.
Yeah, Nepal is a place where things tend to happen very quickly and then very slowly. So we saw
like the ascent and descent of a mountain.
Yeah, exactly. We saw the royal family were wiped out, and it was such a shock to everyone in Nepal because this had been one of the anchors, even though for a lot of people, the royals were very, very remote, but they also were a fact of life. They were the government. They were what you thought of when you thought of the government. Out in the rural areas, which is where most Nepalis live, people still talk when they say they're going to Kathmandu. Sometimes they talk about going to Nepal as if that's someplace different from where they live. And the royals were one of the things that at least let them feel like they were part of the same country. But then after the royals were overthrown and the Maoists came in, and the Maoists in 2008 had, in my view, and I've been saying this within government circles for years before that, actually about a decade at that point, they had probably more popular legitimacy than anybody else. But then it took them forever just to write a constitution. It took them 7 years before there was any constitution even written. And even then, it was largely just on paper. So I think a lot of the problem is not so much, are we going to see a French Revolution? Or to put it in Nepali terms, back before the Maoists came in, I used to have big arguments with the U.S. ambassador to Nepal, who used to say, we can't ever let the Maoists come in. It'll be like the Cambodian Revolution, like the Khmer Rouge. It'll be year one. We're not going to see something like that. But I think we may well see just more cycles of governments changing and not really getting anything done that helps the people with their very legitimate grievances.
I have always said no oldest established news and analysis daily podcast has a better Asia expert on hand than Jonah Blank. He's in WhatsApp groups from everywhere, from Kathmandu to Ulaanbaatar. He is the author of Mullahs on the Mainframe and Arrow of the Blue-Skinned God. Very good to talk to you again. I would say let's do it again under better circumstances.
Definitely.
We always have you on for revolutions, don't we?
Hey, I anytime you give a call, Mike, I will jump to it and gladly be here.
So it's Ulaanbaatar, Kathmandu, and Brooklyn. Those are your WhatsApp groups.
Actually, none in. I've got to start some WhatsApp groups. I'm really interested in what Mamdani is doing, but I don't know of any active now.
All right. We'll get on that.
Right on.
It's also speaking of Maoist revolutionaries.
That's right. There you go. Well, he's about as close to a Maoist revolutionary as Prachanda is.
Thank you so much, Jonah.
Thanks, Mike.